He's a bit confused in the cuts of 3 days earlier. We see our Calix telling Russell that the prince would obviously ask for their support. In any case, they couldn't support the fifth prince seal. Russell says he understands since that guy seems to be the grandson of Marcus Antonio. Right, the one who calls all that mess with them. Calix, as that's part of it too, but also that they wouldn't gain much from that guy. Of course, either way, saying they'll support the first prince carries a lot of risk. Russell asks what the demands will be. Our boy says he wants them to no longer pay taxes on the merchant guilds in that region. Even in the game, Warhold avoiding taxes is too good. Russell asks, confused, why do you want that if they don't even have a merchant guild in that territory? Our Fenwa all sitting with his legs crossed, saying they disbanded because of financial hardship, but obviously that can't stay like that forever. Besides, the country is going to be divided into 2 factions, and even though both princes are powerful, each one influences their own territory. And if they're under the first prince, obviously they could ask for something like that. They would suggest 1,000 magical artifacts per year, and he knows the prince will try to play hardball. But in the end, he'll agree without much hesitation. Apparently, he doesn't want to pay tax on 1,000 sales. And of course, Russell says that's too little. But our boy says not to worry and to just offer it. He's got a plan. Russell replies, fine then. As always, the kid must have some unconventional plan that he just doesn't understand. Back to the present, the prince tells him to say it already. If it's something he can do, he'll definitely make it happen. Now the mustache guy was smiling. Everything was working out just as the young master had said. The next day, the boy is exhausted from riding all night right, so nobody could catch up to them. Crot relaxed, tells him that they're almost arriving in the city of Parnu, and then they'll be able to rest a bit. Our boy, though, has a sore butt from riding. My God, with that appearance already and saying something like that peculiar. He tries to blame him for it, and Crot asks, who else are you going to blame then? At that, our boy just tells him to shut up and stop being a pain. Crot laughs, saying a 15-year-old boy obviously would be a bit too sensitive. On the other hand, our boy is thinking that if he met the owner of this body, he'd be come up for never training this crap. Look who's talking, huh? A guy who only runs away from training. At that, Crot asks why they're going to pause you when in theory they're heading to the capital. Calix says it's because he absolutely doesn't want to meet the first prince, so they're taking a different route. I ask why so much fear, and he says it's not fear at all. As if he'd be scared of that guy, Crot looks a little awkward, and our boy says he already planned to pass through this place on the way back. The only thing that changed was the order of things. As if he were running away from the first prince, Crot's got a little smirk going. Calix knows that, as always, the bastards are thinking he's just some kind of kid. Our boy knows he has to become class 4, but with Russell's training, it's going to take an eternity, and that's the reason he came to pause you. There's a dungeon in this region where you can get an S-rank skill. A dungeon with a good reward is already rare, especially once he can do with his weak body. To complete any of the other ones, they mean a giant expedition party. Obviously, though, nobles would start complaining, and that's where Pause New stands out. It's a free city without any nobles. A place where you can easily hire mercenaries and form parties without trouble. He points to the horizon, saying they finally reached the free city of Pos New. At the entrance, they were told to line up and sign the documents. Our boy is just a skeleton at that point, saying he lied on the form. Already in an inn, our boy thanks everyone for their hard work. Before they left again, though, they needed to get the heat out of their bodies, and he asks if anyone knows a good place for that. The guys are all excited, asking if he means that place. Crot is shocked that he'd suggest something like that, but oh well, everyone's already heading out. I thought they were going to the house of the world's oldest profession, but that's not the case. But just out there in the middle of the city where there's food, a little party going on. When suddenly, someone welcomes everyone. Another fanboy enters the scene and already pulls Crot's arm, saying this place has the best alcohol in town. Apparently, Alex already recognizes it and comes in, saying the place seems pretty good. Inside, it's just a normal little bar, and everyone's asking why Crot isn't drinking. He replies that if anything happens to the young master, he has to be at 100%, so he's going to avoid that. Our boy, who was observing, then sees the guy who pulled him in at the entrance and calls out to him, who turns around kind of confused. Alex walks over, telling him to come closer, and asks if there's a quieter place, or even another shop would be fine. The kid replies that there is, but obviously, if he takes them to another place, he's going to run into trouble. Besides, it seemed like his men were enjoying themselves, so he didn't need to. Alex, however, says he just needs a guy to take him and one other person to a quiet hall. He tosses a gold coin in the air and says that would be a payment. The kid grabs it all happy and says he gets it, but in return, he'd have to leave the rest of the nights there eating and drinking. The boy says that's fine and calls for Crot. Sometime later, they're in the city, with the kid showing them the way. Our boy asks if he's lived in Pasnu for long, and he says yes, for over 10 years. That surprises our boy, who says he doesn't even look like he's 10 years old, which makes the kid square, saying he's 14. Crot is just laughing at the two of them, but then Calix asks if he's been there for 10 years, he must know who the strongest person in Pasno is. A little embarrassed, a kid says, is probably Mr. Omar, who is the leader of the Steel Shield mercenaries. But the truth is, he's never fought the other three leaders, so maybe it's just a rumor. Calix tells him to talk about the other two groups then, and he's surprised that the boy doesn't know anything. But he explains the other groups are the Red Wolf and the Black Wing. Together, the three make up the largest mercenary groups in the city. Our boy asks how the spring hunting went, and he replies that since the taverns are packed, it definitely wasn't bad. But apparently, the adults are worried because something called the supermoon is coming. At that moment, the kid says they've arrived. Everyone is standing in front of a giant mansion. A super dark-looking girl suddenly shows up, saying she knows they don't have a reservation. So what are they doing there? Our boy takes a look and says it was this kid who guided him there. The woman says Yareen did that again, but she loses her temper, saying they're closed today, and asks them to leave. But then she notices something strange and catches Calix's gaze. It seems like he's looking at the ring, and that looks a little worrying to her. I don't know why. Maybe the boy isn't a married woman. At that moment, the guy tries to say that Yareen didn't guide him properly, so he'll have to give that coin back. The kid gets startled and says that's not true. He guided them just fine. Then he hides and says that now he realizes they weren't looking for women, but for information, so he's not giving that back. But then the woman calls Yareen's name, and he starts trembling, hand going into his pocket. In that panic, our boy gives her a stare, status window active man. So listener Yarina was the one who was looking for. Not just the girl, but down below it shows she has an SS-ranked finance talent. In the future, she become the one you've been searching for. It's just a shame she won't have a kid. Damn this story. I'm already missing Layla. Obviously, Alex is excited. Seems like his whole plan to travel to the capital was just an excuse to find this person. But by chance, he found her right there. He then asks if this is the place where he can get information, and she says yes. But suddenly, the other woman, there already tells the guys to raise their crossbows and orders Yarina to get away from him. Right away, a crowd draws his sword and says they have no idea who they're pointing those at. The woman, though, replies that in a high-class hall like this, it's rare for people to be so ignorant as to insist. But once in a while, people like them show up, and that's why they have to be careful. Obviously, if they left quietly now, nothing would happen to them. But Calix says she's being too rigid. If she keeps hurting people away the moment they arrive without even having a conversation, how is she supposed to gain new allies? Yarina is asking to give them a chance, but the woman just tells her to shut up. Then Calix says that the woman might have a beauty that defies age, but she didn't seem to be smarter than the young master. Maybe it's Yarina who's actually the master of the house? Now I'm a bit confused. but the woman seems to know just how talented the girl it is. She says fine, then, and tells him to say what he is before he ends up with a hole in his forehead. Calix simply replies that she probably already knows, so he'd be best for her to take off that ring and give it to the girl behind her. The woman just asks if he has any idea what that means. To which our boy replies that with a symbol of agrapness, my god, what a difficult name, it's obvious he knows. Why wouldn't she want to be recognized walking around like that? Daenerys even gave a little wink, and just like that, she yells out the name Prince Calix, already aiming arrows man. Of course the bastard says that apparently she knew who he was from the start and should have just said so. What he doesn't get is whether she just knows his name. Or she knows how he found this place, or what information he wants and what he came there to offer or receive. The woman is kind of confused. It seems only royalty should be able to recognize her because of that ring, which makes it all weirder since this kid is just the heir of some regional territory. Calix realizes she's confused and asked if she's really